I submitted it to Gene Hackman, and Gene I'd known for many years, but we'd never worked together. And he was in a mood at that time. He says, I don't want to do any more violent pictures.
For decades, Clint Eastwood has been the ultimate Hollywood tough guy. Silent, sharp-eyed, and deadly with a gun. He carved his name into Western legend, but there's one mystery that has never been solved. Why did John Wayne, the biggest cowboy star before him, refuse to work with him? The official story is creative differences, but the truth? It might be something far bigger. Here's, at 94, Clint Eastwood admits what we all expected. From small-town rascal to Hollywood icon. While he was the ultimate cowboy and squinting gunslinger, Clint Eastwood was just a California kid with a mischievous streak and a talent for dodging schoolwork. Born in 1930 into a well-off family, Clint's teenage years were as rebellious as some of the outlaws he later played on screen. Some say he was expelled, or even suspended. According to Clint, The Life and Legend by Patrick McGilligan, Eastwood claimed he left Piedmont High School because he felt uncomfortable with the lack of racial diversity. However, was that the real reason? Some sources say he was actually expelled for more mischievous reasons, like leaving a rude message on the athletic field scoreboard or burying someone in effigy on the school lawn. Another version, reported by the East Bay Monthly, suggests that he was already causing trouble before he even officially started at Piedmont, allegedly riding his bike on the school field and getting into it with the administration. While the exact circumstances remain unclear, Eastwood didn't stay at Piedmont long. He ended up at Oakland Technical High School, where he eventually graduated in 1948. His academic life may have been rocky, but that rebellious streak, it never really faded. Instead of hitting the books, young Clint was hustling. He took on odd jobs, paperboy, golf caddy, lifeguard, getting a taste of the real world long before he'd take over Hollywood. However, life had bigger plans. At 21, Clint was drafted into the Army during the Korean War. Instead of heading to the battlefield, though, he found himself stationed at Fort Ord, California. One day, hitching a ride on a Douglas AD bomber returning from Seattle, Clint experienced something straight out of an action movie before he ever stepped foot on a set. The plane ran out of fuel and crashed into the ocean. With no time to waste, Clint and the pilot had to swim 2 miles through rough waters to make it back to shore. Now, while at Fort Ord, Clint caught the attention of director Arthur Lubin, who saw something in the tall, rugged soldier. Lubin set him up with an audition, and soon Clint was grinding it out in Hollywood, landing bit parts, taking forgettable television roles, and working in low-budget films. For years, he was just another struggling actor trying to break through. Then came 1958, the break that made Clint a star. A television series called Rawhide hit the television, and it quickly skyrocketed Clint's fame. Cast as Rowdy Yates, Clint finally had a steady gig. The show ran from 1959 to 1965, making him a household name. However, there was a problem. Rowdy was too clean-cut, too nice. Clint didn't want to be America's sweetheart. He wanted grit, danger, and edge. So, when a strange offer came in for a low-budget Western being filmed in Italy, Clint didn't hesitate. With a fistful of dollars, Clint redefined the cowboy. No more white hats and chivalry. This was something different, grimy, violent, and dripping with cool. His character, the man with no name, was mysterious, ruthless, and utterly iconic. The film was a smash in Europe, of course, and it led to a Western called For a Few Dollars More. And the good, the bad, and the ugly. By the time they hit the United States in 1967, Clint wasn't just a star. he was a legend in the making. Hollywood, give him his big break. At first, critics weren't exactly showering Clint's with praise. His spaghetti westerns were too gritty, too violent, too different. They weren't the clean-cut cowboy flicks Hollywood was used to. Reviewers grumbled, dismissed them, and wrote Clint off as a passing phase. Fast forward a few decades, and those very films, A Fistful of Dollars, For a Few Dollars More, The Good, The Bad, and The Ugly, are now untouchable classics. By 1968, the tide was turning. Clint stepped into Hang 'em High, a revenge-fueled western that finally got critics on his side. He followed it up with roles that showed he wasn't just a cowboy. He could do action, thrillers, and even war epics. Then came Dirty Harry in 1971. If Clint hadn't already solidified his spot in Hollywood, this was the role that did it. Tough, no nonsense, and wielding a .44 Magnum with the confidence of a man who knew exactly what he was doing, Dirty Harry became the kind of cop movie that would define an entire genre. Now, while Clint was making his mark in Hollywood, he made sure to always play by his own rules, even when Hollywood came knocking with some of the biggest roles in history. Clint has a reputation of turning down famous roles. In 1969, after Sean Connery walked away from the role of James Bond, producers went searching for a new 007. Their eyes landed on Clint Eastwood, hoping he'd bring his signature cool to the suave British spy. Turns out, Clint wasn't interested. Bond should be played by a Brit, he insisted, passing on a role that could have redefined his career. It wasn't just Bond, though. Warner Brothers wanted him to don the red cape and play Superman. Yes, the Superman. Once again, though, Clint wasn't having it. He just couldn't see himself as the Man of Steel, admitting he preferred roles that felt more gritty and grounded. Then came Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now in 1979, one of the most legendary war films ever made. Clint was offered the lead role of Captain Willard, but when he heard it meant spending 16 grueling weeks in the Philippines, he shut it down immediately. Instead, Martin Sheen took the role, and the rest is cinema history. Eastwood's career choices may seem unconventional, but that's exactly why he's a Hollywood legend. Plus, while Clint was busy dodging iconic roles, he was also carving out a career that refused to hit the brakes. A career that refused to slow down. Now, the 70s and 80s saw Clint bouncing between westerns, thrillers, and more Dirty Harry sequels, each one cementing his reputation as Hollywood's ultimate tough guy. Then, in 1992, Clint did something even bigger. He directed Unforgiven, a dark, haunting western that stripped away every romanticized notion of cowboy justice. The film was a masterpiece. 9 Oscar nominations, 4 wins, Best Picture, Best Director. Clint, at 62, had just directed one of the greatest westerns of all time. He wasn't done either. The Bridges of Madison County showed a softer, more romantic side of Clint. Then came Mystic River, a crime drama so intense it won 2 Oscars. Not to mention $1 Million Baby, which quickly became another knockout.
Yeah, out of pity.
Don't you say that if it ain't true. If I'm too old for this, then I got nothing.
4 Oscars, including Best Director and Best Picture. At 74, Clint became the oldest director to ever win 2 Oscars. Not bad for a guy whose critics once dismissed him. However, while Clint was navigating the tough world of showbiz, it wasn't without its set of controversies. For years, Clint was plagued with rumors and controversies with fellow stars and big hits in Hollywood at the time. Now, as it turns out, some of the rumors were actually true. Take Clint's relationship with John Wayne as an example. Why John Wayne and Clint never shared the screen. Now, if there were ever 2 Hollywood titans who seemed destined to cross paths, it was John Wayne and 2 men, two legends. Both are towering figures in the Western genre. Yet, they never made a movie together. Why? Rumor has it that John Wayne just wasn't a fan. See, Wayne was old-school Hollywood. His cowboys were noble, heroic, and always fighting for the good guys.
Well, son, since you haven't learned to respect your elders, it's time you learn to respect your betters.
Clint, on the other hand, played the morally gray anti-hero, the kind of character who didn't care much for rules.
Why do they call you Dirty Harry?
Well, that's one thing about our Harry. Doesn't play any favorites. Harry hates everybody.
The spaghetti westerns changed everything. They made Clint the new face of the cowboy, and Wayne didn't like it one bit. Wayne even turned down the lead role in Dirty Harry, a move that, looking back, probably stung. Then, in 1973, Clint reached out with a personal offer, a role in High Plains Drifter. Wayne's response was a hard pass. He reportedly felt the film didn't represent the real American West. Some say he thought it was too dark, too cynical, everything Clint stood for, and everything Wayne had spent his career avoiding. Of course, there's another set of people who think maybe Wayne saw Clint as a threat. Clint was becoming the new face of the Western, and Wayne wasn't ready to hand over the reins. By the time Wayne passed away in 1979, Clint had already cemented himself as a leading man. However, what really set him apart was directing. Wayne was never a director of great repute, but Clint? He became one of Hollywood's greatest filmmakers. With multiple Academy Awards and his own production company, Malpaso, Clint wasn't just starring in the films, he was making them on his own terms. Over the years, Clint's strong-willed nature hadn't just led to tension with John Wayne, though. He had his fair share of feuds with other big names, too. Hollywood's unapologetic rebel. One of the most infamous ones, though, was with Spike Lee. You see, Lee took issue with Clint's Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima, criticizing the lack of racial representation. Clint didn't take it lightly. His response was plain when he said Lee should just shut up. Now, while things were heated for a while, the two eventually made peace. However, that wasn't the end of the controversy surrounding Clint. Soon, another feud erupted between him and Michael Moore. After Clint's American Sniper became a box office hit, Moore took to social media, claiming the film glorified snipers. He even shared a personal grievance. His grandfather had been killed by a sniper in World War II. Clint, as expected, didn't back down. The audience? They sided with Clint. American Sniper raked in massive numbers, proving once again that Clint knows exactly what audiences want to see. Eventually, the drama between these two hit its peak at a National Board of Review event. As the story goes, Clint got on stage and casually announced that if Michael Moore ever showed up at his house for one of those surprise interviews, he'd come at him with a firearm. The audience laughed. Clint? Not so much. Safe to say, Moore was stunned. The man had faced off with presidents and billion-dollar corporations, but Clint threatening to raise a firearm at him? That was a new one. Clint later denied that the whole thing went down like that, but then doubled down on the idea that coming at Moore wasn't the worst idea in the world. Since then, Moore kept Clint's name out of his mouth. Now, some Hollywood feuds start over money, others over movies. However, Clint managed to start one over nothing other than political correctness. When the Red Hot Chili Peppers bassist came for the cowboy, you see, at some point, Clint made it clear that he wasn't a fan of how certain things that weren't considered offensive in his day suddenly were now. He blamed a whole generation for pushing the boundaries of political correctness. That was enough to set Flea, the bassist of Red Hot Chili Peppers, on fire. Flea went straight to social media, blasting Clint for what he called an outdated and ignorant take. According to him, Clint's comments weren't just problematic, they were harmful to the entire evolution of human ideology. Clint's response apparently never came. Many people thought Clint probably had no idea who Flea even was. If you told him Flea played bass for one of the biggest rock bands in the world, he'd probably assume it was some underground jazz group from the 50s. However, that didn't stop an entire swarm of people on social media from criticizing Clint for promoting archaic views of what is considered right and wrong. Let's be real, though. If Michael Moore and Flea had issues with Clint, at least they weren't dating him. Sondra Locke was. Back when their entire relationship began, though, Sondra probably had no idea of the roller coaster she was about to get herself into. One of Clint's biggest legal fights. Clint's love life has been just as dramatic as the Hollywood westerns that made him a star. Over the decades, he's been through multiple marriages, high-profile affairs, and some seriously messy breakups. It all started with his first wife, Maggie Johnson, a college student he married before fame came knocking. However, as Clint's career took off in the early 60s, so did his wandering eye. The Hollywood heartthrob became notoriously unfaithful, engaging in affairs with a rawhide stuntwoman, a flight attendant, and even a TV reporter sent to interview him. Then came Sondra Locke, his co-star in The Outlaw Josie Wales, and the woman who would bring both passion and chaos into his life. For over 10 years, Sondra and Clint were a Hollywood power couple. They met while filming The Outlaw Josie Wales in 1976, and for a while, it seemed like a perfect match, personally and professionally. They lived together, starred in movies together, and even built careers together. However, when Sondra started branching out on her own, Clint wasn't having it. She directed her first film, Rat Boy, in 1986. Instead of celebrating her success, Clint allegedly locked her out of their house. His excuse was appalling. He claimed she was just an occasional roommate. Eventually, the couple were having too many fights for either of them to handle, and they decided to end things. Of course, the breakup was ugly. Lawsuits were filed, careers were damaged, and while Clint moved on relatively unscathed, Sondra's career never fully recovered. By the end of it, she didn't just leave with a broken heart, she left with a legal battle. You see, Sondra tried to sue Clint for palimony, but instead of a public courtroom showdown, they settled. Clint threw her a bone, a production deal with Warner Brothers. The deal sounded good, except it was all smoke and mirrors. Sondra submitted over 30 scripts. Guess what? Every single one got rejected. It wasn't long before she realized what was up. This wasn't a golden opportunity, it was a trapdoor. So, Sondra sued him again, this time for fraud. Once again, the case got settled out of court. The sting of betrayal stayed with her until her last days. She later admitted she wished she had spent half as much time with Clint as she did. At the time, not many were surprised when news about Sondra and Clint's controversial relationship hit the headlines. If Clint moves fast in his love life, let's just say his directing style is warp speed. Clint's directing style didn't mesh well with everyone. As the story goes, Clint was a complete beast on set. Actors would barely have time to blink before they hear, "Cut, moving on." Clint was notorious for his one-take philosophy. No endless rehearsals or overanalyzing, just raw, unfiltered, get it right the first time filmmaking. Safe to say that not everyone could keep up. Matt Damon learned this the hard way while filming Invictus in 2009. Playing the captain of South Africa's rugby team meant mastering a South African accent, a skill that, let's be honest, isn't learned overnight. Matt wanted to fine-tune it, perfect it. However, Clint simply wasn't interested. If the first or second take wasn't good enough, too bad. Matt had to roll with it. Despite his frustration, though, it worked. His performance landed him an Oscar nomination. Of course, if you ask Matt, he prefers a little more breathing room when he's calling the shots. Matt wasn't the only Hollywood A-lister to feel Clint's no-nonsense approach either. For decades, Tom Hanks and Clint had been two of the most respected men in Hollywood, yet their paths never crossed. Until Sully in 2016, Tom played the real-life hero pilot, Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger, who saved over 100 lives with a miraculous emergency landing. This clearly sounded like a high-stakes role and a performance that required layers of emotion and precision. However, Clint had no patience for layers. After the filming for this movie was done, Tom described the experience as, well, a little terrifying. He even joked that Clint treated him like cattle. It is also said that a man like Clint doesn't need words to get his point across. Just one look, a subtle frown, a piercing gaze, and actors know they've missed the mark. Tom learned this firsthand on the set of Sully, and let's just say he did not want to see that look. However, as nerve-wracking as Clint's silent disapproval was, there was another intimidating presence lurking on set. The real Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger himself. Sully was brought in as a consultant, and he had thoughts. A lot of them. The only problem was that Clint wasn't exactly the take-notes kind of director. If anyone was calling the shots, it was him. Ultimately, this mixture of talents led to some serious friction. Rumor has it, Clint and Sully butted heads more than once. Sully, understandably, wanted every scene to be as close to reality as possible. Clint, on the other hand, had his own vision. After all, he had survived a plane crash once too, back in his younger years when his aircraft went down near Point Reyes. He swam through freezing waters to survive. He knew a thing or two about mid-air emergencies. One thing he hadn't done, though, was safely land a failing plane on the Hudson River, saving over 100 lives. So Sully definitely had a bit more experience in that department. Despite the behind-the-scenes tension, though, Sully turned out to be a massive success. Critics loved it. Tom's performance was praised, Clint's direction was lauded, and Sully himself got even more recognition for his real-life heroism. Everyone won, even if getting there wasn't exactly smooth sailing. However, creative tension wasn't the only thing dividing Clint and Tom on set. The film was shot during peak election season, the 2016 showdown between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. If you know anything about Hollywood, you know this was one of the most polarizing elections ever. Why? Well, because Clint and Tom were on opposite sides. Clint, ever the Hollywood outlier, was one of the few major industry figures to openly back Trump. Meanwhile, Tom was firmly Team Hillary. It was the elephant and donkey in the room, but both men were pros. They kept it professional. However, not everyone has been able to shrug off Clint's politics. Yet, despite his tough-as-nails persona, Clint swears he wants his actors to feel comfortable on set. For the most part, though, even those who've clashed with him end up respecting the final product. Matt Damon may have grumbled about Clint's one-take rule, but it got him an Oscar nomination. Tom Hanks might have feared Clint's death stare, but Sully became one of his most celebrated roles. It seems Clint built a career on no-nonsense filmmaking.
You're thinking, what's a movie tradesman doing out here? You know, they're all left-wingers out there.
But when it came to protecting his name, he was just as relentless. A $6.1 million knockout. In October 2021, he won a $6.1 million lawsuit against a shady Lithuanian company, Mediatonus UAB, for illegally using his image to sell CBD products, a chemical compound found in cannabis. What made it worse was that this company didn't just use any image. They went full scam mode by crafting a fake interview that made it seem like Clint, at 91 years old, was suddenly a CBD mogul. They even photoshopped him into an appearance on the Today Show to make it more believable. In the end, the lawsuit was a slam dunk. Mediatonus UAB ghosted the court, which led to a default judgment. The ruling was a $6 million payout, an extra $100,000 in legal fees, and a permanent ban on using Clint's name or face. However, Clint wasn't just after the cash. He wanted to send a message. He told the New York Post he hoped this case would make online scammers think twice before trying to profit off someone else's legacy. There was one twist to the case, though. His claim for defamation damages was denied. The judge ruled that while the article was misleading, it wasn't explicitly defamatory. Ultimately, this wasn't the first time Clint had to battle it out in court. Clint's car ramming case. Let's rewind to 1988, back when Dirty Harry Usambatieri was still making headlines, but this time for something a little more unexpected. A woman named Stacy McLaughlin filed a $100,000 lawsuit against Clint, claiming he rammed her car in a Warner Brothers parking lot. The reason was that she parked in his spot. According to McLaughlin, Clint repeatedly hit it with his pickup truck.
I wanted one of those cars. Could you get
That's right.
You gave him a car.
We did give him a car.
When Clint told his side of the story, though, it was completely different. He claimed he was just trying to park his car. Even the judge was mostly on his side. While the court ruled that Clint had to cough up $960 for repairs, McLaughlin's attempt to get punitive damages fell flat. The judge called Clint's actions morally wrong, but not malicious enough to justify a big payday. His lawyer even argued that McLaughlin's lawsuit was more about dollar signs than justice. Surprisingly, Clint's no-nonsense approach isn't limited to movie sets or courtroom battles. It also extends to his role as a father. Clint's parenting and tough love. While his career has been an open book, his family life? That's a whole different story. Clint has amassed quite the brood over the years, but exactly how many children does he have? That's a mystery even Hollywood's best scriptwriters couldn't crack. Some names have been confirmed, others rumored, and let's just say, the Eastwood family tree has a few question marks. However, one thing is for certain, Clint's a strict parent. With 8 children from multiple relationships, Clint has never been the doting Hollywood-style dad who showers his kids with gifts. Instead, he believed in hard work, discipline, and learning things the hard way. His son, Scott Eastwood, now an actor himself,
I would think, okay, this is your dad.
Who again?
Clint. His name's Clint Eastwood.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I heard
that
him.
guy.
has spoken openly about growing up with his father's strict, old-school parenting style. In an interview with GQ magazine, Scott revealed that when he asked his dad for money, Clint simply told him to go earn it himself. What's interesting, though, is that some of Clint's children say his parenting went beyond just tough love. Sometimes, it was just tough, period. Scott recounted an incident where he ended up abandoning his 14-year-old sister at a party. When Clint found out, he was so furious that he shoved Scott against a wall and injured him. Some might call it harsh discipline, others might call it downright abusive. But Scott? He doesn't seem to hold a grudge. Despite the intense moment, he still speaks of his father with deep respect, crediting him for shaping his work ethic and resilience. Now, when it comes to money, Clint's philosophy isn't all that different from his parenting. Practical, disciplined, and with a touch of indulgence when it suits him. How Clint spends his money. Clint isn't just a Hollywood legend, he's a real estate mogul, a car fanatic, and a man who knows how to make his money work. Over the years, he's built an empire of luxury properties across the globe. His real estate portfolio is the stuff of dreams. A 6,100 square foot mansion in Bel Air, a 1,000-acre ranch in Bernie, a stunning estate in Hawaii, a sprawling home in Idaho, and even an apartment in Burbank. Whether for investment or for his children to have a place to crash, Clint has plenty of prime real estate to go around. Make no mistake, though, Clint isn't just about sitting on his fortune. The man has a need for speed that rivals even the most hardcore gearheads. If his Gran Torino roll didn't tip you off, the guy loves cars. His collection is elite, featuring classics like a Ford Roadster, a Jaguar XK150 Roadster, a Cadillac Eldorado, and even a Gran Torino. Yes, just like in the movie. Since driving wasn't enough, Clint even went ahead and got himself a pilot's license, owning and flying multiple helicopters. If you thought that was unexpected, just know Clint isn't just about indulging in luxury. He's got a philanthropic side, too. Alongside his business partner, Andy Williams, Clint took matters into his own hands and invested in California real estate, not just to profit, but to give back. They built 90 homes for the public and worked to preserve 2,000 acres of land, ensuring it wouldn't fall into the wrong hands or be lost to overdevelopment. A cowboy with a cause. However, for a man who built his career on steely glares and swift trigger fingers, Clint has a surprisingly zen side. Clint is really into transcendental meditation.
I'm a great supporter of transcendental meditation. I've been using it for...
Beneath the rugged cowboy persona, he's been deeply committed to transcendental meditation, or TM, for over 40 years. This is a practice that has helped him navigate the pressures of Hollywood and his turbulent personal life. His journey into meditation started in the early 70s, while filming Joe Kidd. According to Patrick McGilligan's biography, Clint, the Life and Legend, Clint's co-star played TM tapes in her car while driving him to the set, which sparked his curiosity. At the time, meditation was gaining popularity in the West, thanks to celebrities like the Beatles, and Clint quickly embraced the practice. Ever since, he's reportedly meditated twice daily. Though Clint has said he doesn't believe in God, he's described meditation as a powerful tool for stress relief. In a GQ interview, he even credited it with helping him better understand religious people, saying, "I believe you have a conscience and you have a soul. I don't know if it's injected into you. I think it's probably something inherited." It's an unexpected layer to Clint's persona, one that suggests the gunslinger of the big screen might just be a peace seeker at heart. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.